Well, good evening. I want to say hi to all of our live streamers who are with us or who are going to be watching this class later today. We just want you to know that you are a huge part of our church, and we're so thankful and we're excited that you're studying the Word of God with us. And I thank you for everyone who has showed up here today. Looks like we also have some more people trickling in. And so I'm just glad that you are all here this evening. So tonight we're going to continue on in our class talking about peace. And we've talked about having peace with ourselves. We've talked about having peace with God. We've talked about having peace with other people. And so we're just going to keep talking about different themes that are really going to affect all of those areas. And so today what we're going to be talking about is going to have to do with peace for who you are. And having peace with who you are. Now, how many of you have ever seen the movie Elf? It's a Christmas classic, okay? Now, at the beginning of the movie, little buddy Elf is there, and he's making toys, and as he's making toys, he's behind schedule, and the head toy-making elf is asking him how he's doing, and he's asking how many have you made, and Buddy kind of lets him know, this is how many I've made, and like all the other elves stop, and they just look at him because he's way behind schedule. He's not making toys like everyone else. And then he starts lamenting and calling himself names, and everyone's like, ah! And as he does it, he's talking about how he's different. And then all the other elves are like, well, you're special. You have unique talents. You change the batteries and you bring us down an octave in our singing. But he was a little bit eccentric. But the whole point was that he thought he was different. And he knew he was different from all the other elves. And he makes the point, it seems like everyone else is exactly the same. And they all have the same talents. And then he figured out he's not an elf. He's a human boy. And so the whole story goes, and by the end of the movie, he's really eccentric, but he gets beloved, even though he was different. Different from the elves, different from the people who were his new family. And so we understand that Buddy the elf felt different. Now, how many of you have ever seen the movie Harry Potter before? Okay, some of you have seen the movie Harry Potter before. Now, there's a scene where in the first movie where Ron and Hermione and Harry are there, and they're supposed to do some spell to cause a feather to lift up, and Ron is there, and he's saying the little spell incorrectly, and he couldn't raise it, and then this little girl pipes in named Hermione, and she goes, it's not Leviosa, it's Leviosa, it's Leviosa. And so then she flitters all the feather up. And then afterwards, all the other boys and all the other kids in the class start making fun of her. And it wasn't that she was trying to be rude. She wasn't trying to be arrogant. She wasn't trying to be mean. But she was a little bit different. She was a little bit socially awkward. But then when she befriended the others and when they understood who she was and her temperament, her personality, then they became best of friends. You see, that's kind of how we are. A lot of people, when I ask them, do you fit in? Do you ever feel like you don't understand yourself? You don't understand how other people are so similar, but you're so different. Maybe you're one of those people. Maybe you have felt that way in your life. You're like, so many people are so similar. How come I'm so different? You know, I hear this sometimes with people who had multiple siblings in their family, where they would grow up and they're like, my parents and my siblings are so similar, but I'm so different. I'm the black sheep. Does your family have a black sheep just personality and temperament-wise? Are you that? I'm going to tell you, I was kind of like that in my family because, one, I was adopted, but two, my family, they're all very similar in that they're laid back, they're outgoing, they're extroverted, they're people-oriented. They're easy to make friends. They're popular. They're all musically talented. I was not any of those type of things. And so I had this natural kind of difference. And I know that a lot of times you may feel that way, whether it be your family or in the workplace or maybe even in the church, where you're like, how come so many people seem to be so similar, but I'm so different. They don't understand me. They don't get me. That just like in my illustration, sometimes we feel like Buddy the Elf. Everyone has the same talents. Everyone is the same. Why am I so different? But I want you to understand you're different for a good reason. You're different because God made you that way. Now, how many of you watched the snow the other week? Okay, we saw the snow coming down. You know, one of the facts that I learned as a kid that I absolutely loved was even though you got trillions and billions and however many snowflakes coming down, even though they're so similar and they look so much alike, there's not one snowflake that is like the other. And I just thought, think about the beauty of God's creation in that. Now think of how the most beautiful creation that God has ever created was mankind. That even though we may be similar in some ways, we are uniquely different for a reason. And oftentimes, those differences are a blessing. And sometimes we think, you know, in order for people to fit in order for people to like each other, in order for a group to have cohesiveness, they got to be all the same. But actually, that's not really true. How many of you married someone who's the opposite of you? Because you were looking for a complement, not the same thing. You know, how many of you, you grew up having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You didn't grow up having jelly and jelly sandwiches. Well, maybe you did. But most of the time, people think peanut butter and jelly. They're two radically different. One's salty, one's sweet. The consistency, two different vegetation from vines. They're different. But I want us to understand, people really struggle with this. This is one of the things that people often come and say, I don't get how I'm so different. I don't get how no one understands me. How come no one understands me? How come no one gets how I think? How come no one gets how I feel? And then that's made more complex because most people are self-focused and not listening to each other. And then you add in bad communication, and then everything is just really, really messed up. But I want us to understand, first and foremost, I want us to understand our uniqueness. I want us to have an inner peace with ourselves to realize I'm not horrible, I'm not insane, I'm not in this or that. I'm just how God made me. You know, God said this in Genesis 1:26 and 27. He said, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and of the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And then Psalm 119 says something also. In verse 14, it says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My goal is for everyone to know in their soul that they were made wonderfully by God. God made you exactly how he wanted you. If he wanted us all to be the same, we would all look the same. We would all talk the same. We'd all think the same. We'd all have the same talents. Here's the thing. We're not a bunch of Christmas elves. We're different. And that's a good thing. Now, you may struggle and say, well, Micah, a lot of people don't understand me. A lot of people, I don't even understand myself. Why am I struggling so much emotionally and spiritually in a lot of ways? So I want to talk with you about a kind of counseling and a kind of counseling philosophy that we've actually really known since 400 BC. And even though we knew some basics of this since 400 BC, during the time of a philosopher and a scientist and a teacher by the name of Hippocrates, we understand in modern times, we understand this concept and this philosophy even more so. And so I'm going to be using some terminology to help us understand our own personal uniqueness, to understand how unique and special we are. And here's the thing. A lot of times people say, a lot of people don't understand me. But another common issue people say is, I don't even understand myself. Have you ever had that struggle in your life? Where you said, I don't even understand myself. I don't even get myself. And let me tell you, what we're going to be discussing right now is every human person was created unique and different, but in these differences and uniqueness, God created certain skills and abilities, but also needs. Needs are a little bit different. This is why in the world, we can't treat every single person exactly the same. Okay? People say, well, how come people, I get it, how come people don't understand? Well, they're wired differently than you. They think differently than you. And then how an experience happens to two different people, they'll get two different responses because of how they're wired. Does that kind of make sense? Now, people will say, well, what about environment? Environment, trauma, things like that, that all has a lot of effect in your childhood. But even with an environment, how many of you have more than one kid? Okay? Think about this for a moment. Are all your kids exactly the same? Same mom, same dad, same rules, same values, same church. But you can have two radically different children and be like, we'll have one child and be like, oh, so wonderful. And then the next child will be like, what is this? And then some children where you go, I click, me and you, we get each other. Another child, you'll be like, I don't get you at all. And then they'll look at you and be like, I don't get you at all. Is that simply environment? No. And so what we're going to be talking about is known as temperament therapy or temperament philosophy. Now, some of you have probably heard this before. I know that some of you have even taken a temperament test. We'll talk a little bit about this. But I want us to understand three basic words about that I'm going to be using. And I want you to understand the differences. The first word is temperament. The second word is personality. And the third word is character. Okay? And within this, I'm going to make known to you the differences. And when you understand your temperament, you understand yourself better. And it's really important that you know how to do that. Because then you'll have less animosity with yourself. You can be more gracious to yourself, more forgiving of yourself, more gentle with yourself, because you understand your temperament is going to have some natural inclinations that are both strengths and weaknesses. You're going to have some natural temperamental needs that maybe other people don't have. But when we also understand temperament, we also try to understand other people from a temperament standpoint. So that when I say, oh, I understand Walt's temperament and I understand Doug's temperament, then I can try to relate and say, okay, I understand what their temperament is. So now I can respond to them in a way that's more effective. Or maybe if they do something, maybe something even I don't like, I can take a step back and be like, wait, were they doing that because they're just mean? Or are they doing it because of their temperament? They're not trying to be necessarily mean or nice or indifferent or whatever. It just may be different. And that's one of the things that I want us to understand is sometimes there's not everything so black and white where everything is malicious or gracious. Sometimes it's just different. Does that kind of make sense? We'll get into that a little bit. But I want to define what temperament is. Temperament reveals the traits that are genetic, inborn part of a man that determines how we react to people, places, and things. Simply put, more layman's terms, it's who you are and how God made you. Temperaments reveal your natural inclinations. I'll describe in just a moment the few areas of temperament. But temperament is one of the ways that God made us all unique and different. When God created us in our wombs, He wasn't just making us unique physically with different physical features. He was making us different in temperament. That's why some people are, and there's lots of different temperament philosophies within the realm of temperament therapy. But I want us to understand a few things about temperament. With every temperament, there are strengths and weaknesses. By understanding your temperament, you can know what your natural strengths are and your natural weaknesses. There are some things where some people are naturally good at things. For example, some people are naturally outgoing and charismatic. Other people are very intellectual. They just get things. Now, how do those things actually happen? A lot of that has to do with your temperament, how God genetically made you. Your temperament is actually inborn within you genetically, which is really interesting. I'll mention that a little bit in a moment. By understanding each other's temperament, we can understand why they may think or respond or feel a certain way. You know, when I try to help people understand each other, I try to help them understand their temperament, because when you understand each other's temperament, then you can understand, okay, I understand how this person thinks, and this is why they came to this conclusion. Have you ever had a discussion with someone, and you can list every fact, and the other person can mention every story, and you guys are both not getting each other, and you're like, well, who's right, who's wrong? Well, part of that is temperament. So when I understand, okay, this person is this kind of person, so this is how they're going to approach this event. This is how they're going to approach this problem. This is how they're going to approach this circumstance. And when I understand that way of thinking, then I can be more compassionate to them. And this is ultimately one of the reasons why it's so important. If we're going to have peace with each other and with other people, we try to seek to understand. We seek to learn. We seek to ask questions. And when we do that, that kind of helps us understand people's temperament a little bit better so that we know how to respond. And that's why sometimes when you guys have discussions, you can be like, oh, I get how they got to that conclusion. Now, even husbands and wives, they will have this issue. You typically marry someone who doesn't have your temperament. So the way that you approach issues, the way that you think, the way you come to conclusions, the way how you would deal with something are typically going to be radically different. And then if you add on gender differences, that's another complex layer, because even within people who have similar temperament, gender does affect how that wiring is. You know, women, you do use both sides of your brain. Men, we use more of one side. It's just science. It's just a fact. But we're going to talk about this. Now, I want us to understand something, is that when we understand our temperament, it can lead to more joy and acceptance, and it allows us to know how to grow. I tell people, figure out what your temperament strengths are, and then spend 80% of your time growing in them. And then figure out what your 20%, then spend 20% in your weaknesses. Identify where your weaknesses are, and then try to temper them down. Now, here's the thing. There's no perfect human being. This is why you're not going to have all strengths. But this is also why some people are going to have some natural weaknesses that you may not have. That's why some people are going to be like, well, I don't get why they have this issue. Did you know, for even some things as simple as, some people are, how many of you are like go-getters and I have to get things done? Those type of people. Okay, I'm one of those people. How many of those people are more laid back and be like, it's not the end of the world, or wait till the last minute? You know, part of that isn't necessarily, you know, usually when those at conflict, one will be like, whoa, you're ultimately aggressive, or the other one will be like, whoa, you're lazy. It's not necessarily laziness or aggression. Part of this comes from temperament. See, there's a strength. You know, one of the strengths of the go-getter is, I'm able to get things done. This world would be demolished if things wouldn't get done. But on the flip side, you could have the other guy who'd be like, okay, we need to learn to relax, be still, and rest. You see, even in that, there's a difference. Or some people are very outgoing. Some people are very introverted. And actually, there's strengths to both. And so there is, and one of the facts I want everyone to know, there is not one bad temperament. God created it, right? God created it, so having some self-awareness. In Latin, they have a saying, I won't say the Latin, but ultimately they say the term, know thyself. Which means if you really want to grow, if you want to accomplish, if you want to fulfill your potential, know yourself. Know your strengths. Know your weaknesses. And even when it comes on a spiritual level, our temperament does come into play. There's some people who are going to struggle more with lust than others. Why? Temperament's part of it. Some people are going to struggle more with being a sloth. The part of that is temperament. Some of the people are going to be more anxious and worriers. Part of that is temperament. Some people are going to have stronger problems with anger. Part of that is temperament related. Temperament can affect what area of sin you're going to struggle with. That's why some people are going to struggle with some sin more than others naturally. Okay, does that kind of make sense? And so understanding where our natural temperament weaknesses are helps us to understand what areas do I really need to be more careful in spiritually. You know, there are some temperaments that are more pride-oriented. There are some that are more greed-oriented. There are some that... But when we understand where our strengths and weaknesses lie, then we can grow our strengths for God's glory and temper down our weaknesses because we're self-aware, we're self-controlled, and we discipline that. Now, what's interesting about this is most modern therapy and counseling is starting to incorporate temperament therapy a lot more. And a recent development of this that's really interesting is Dr. Dario Nardi, a professor of psychology in UCLA, now has done like brain scans and things like this, looking at the neuroscience of temperament therapy to prove that temperament therapy actually does exist. How you're wired does affect your perception on the world, how you respond to people. This is why when you're parenting your kids, you can't parent them the same. There are some base level things you got to have that are general for everybody, kind of like God does, but you parent to the kid. Kind of like when you see, if you've ever coached sports, you know the strengths and weaknesses of the players, and you coach to the individual. And so that's one of the areas that we want to understand about temperament. I'll go into a little bit describing the parts of temperament a little bit more, because I know that some of this might be new. But I want to describe some of these basic things. The second term that I want us to focus on is called personality. Personality is different. Is actually, from a technical standpoint, most people in culture actually use the term personality in a lot of ways incorrectly. They actually use it in view of when they're actually using it, they actually mean temperament. But what personality is, it's really how you portray yourself to be. For example, part of my temperament is I'm an introvert, okay? But I also, because I've done ministry and sales and speeches and things like that my whole life, there are times when I can go out and I can shake hands and smile and talk to people where people will think, whoa, that guy's an outgoing person. Now, in reality, am I an outgoing person? No. So I can portray my personality as being an outgoing person. But what I am temperamentally is introverted. Now, one of the things about trying to be accepting of who you are and being okay with that, I'm not saying you don't ever step out and do things outside of your temperament. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the more difference between how you display yourself to be in personality, and the bigger the gap between your personality and who you really are in temperament, the bigger the gap, the more stress you add into your life. This is why trying to put a good show for people will actually stress yourself out temperamentally and personality-wise. It's why people who spend their whole time trying to look really good to everybody else and try to be a certain mold that culture says, everyone, if you want to be popular and accepted and cool, you got to be this mold. Well, most people are typically not going to have that type of mold. And so instead of accepting the uniqueness of who they are by God, they try to be this. And the difference between personality and temperament, the bigger the gap, the more stress you have in your life. This is one of the reasons why part of the psychology of Jesus saying, don't be a hypocrite, don't be that actor. Hypocrite means playing a role, being an actor. Don't try to be something you're not. If you're this, be okay with this. God made you to be this. God did not design fish to be monkeys. God didn't design rhinoceroses to be elephants. And that's okay. And so the more you bring your personality and your temperament together, the less stress you have in your life, and the more peace you will have in your life. And then third, character. Now, a lot of people who knock temperament therapy will say, I don't want to be put in a box. Here's the thing, temperament therapy is not about putting people in boxes, okay? All temperament is saying is there's some natural generalities and inclinations and strengths and weaknesses that you're naturally going to have. Does that mean you're limited by any means? No, it does not. Now, why? Because of something called character. Character is your natural temperament modified by childhood training, education, basic attitudes, beliefs, principles, faith, and motivations. This is where I say this is our hierarchy of how we display ourselves and how we grow. You have your personality, kind of how you show yourself to the world. It's the most shallow part of you. And then you got your temperament, is how God genetically made you. And then you have character. It's what did you do with what God has given you? What have you done with it? Some people are very good at they're naturally, temperamentally good at being gentle. And so when they use that for God's glory and they grow in that character, in that area, then they do amazing things. Some people are go-getters or the ones who like to take initiative. That's why people think they're born leaders. Now, you don't have to be born with that natural temperament to be a leader. But there are some temperaments that do lean more towards the leadership side. They're the ones, even at a young age, they'll take the lead. And so character is being shaped by Christ, taking our temperament and our personality and making them in the shape of Jesus Christ. And when we do that, then our box is limitless. Because now our conformity is in the image of Jesus Christ. That's why two people with the exact same temperament won't do the exact same thing. And the reason for that is because of character. So what are the parts? I want to talk about temperament needs. Now, this is one of the reasons why people will have some stress in their lives. Every individual has temperament needs and to varying degrees. When our temperament needs are filled, then we're joyful, at peace, and more confident. When our temperament needs are not met, then we're often more vulnerable to anger, depression, and hurting other people. Have you ever felt bad and you didn't even know why? You're struggling and you don't know why. Part of this is because you probably have temperament needs that are going unmet and you don't even realize it. And oftentimes, when we realize that we have a temperament need, whether we know it consciously or subconsciously, we do try to feel it. But the problem is we often try to feel it in an unhealthy manner or we try to feel it the world's way. And when we do it that way, then it actually draws our temperament needs even greater. And it puts us in a worse condition. This is why knowing your temperament is so important, because then when you understand your temperament needs, then you can meet them. For example, how many of you are introverts? Okay. If I said, I'm going to hang out at your house 24/7 for the next 3 months, and you get no alone time, how are you going to be at the end of the 3 months? Okay, you're going to be miserable. How many of you are extroverts? Okay, what if I said, okay, I'm going to lock you in the basement and you don't get to see anybody for 3 months? The introverts are like, praise be. But do you see how when your need is not met, can you see how that would cause a turmoil in your emotions and in your soul? Yes. This is why it's so important. That's why I tell people, don't write off temperament therapy. It's not voodoo. It's not generalizations. It's not putting you in a box. But when you can, the whole point of it is, if you understand your temperament, you can understand your needs. And when you understand your needs, you can, 1, allow God to meet them. 2, you'll meet them in a healthy way. And 3, you'll actually get them filled. If you're always running on empty, you're not going to be good for yourself. You're not going to be good for other people. You're not going to be good for your families. You're not going to be good for the church. You're not going to be good at work. That's why it's so important for us to understand and have some honesty and humility with what our temperament is. Walt, did you have a comment?
I have a question.
Okay.
If you're an introvert, but everyone thinks you're an extrovert, I'm guessing what you're saying is your character has modified how you portray yourself.
Yes, that's why character always trumps. That's the thing about this. People say temperament therapy will put you in a box. Those are just your natural inclinations. This is where character are spiritual inclinations, and those spiritual inclinations trump natural ones. But here's the thing. Even if you're a natural introvert, even though you do a lot of things that are very extroverted, you're still going to naturally need that time alone to rest up. But also with temperament, we also understand there's various levels. When I say an introvert, there's some people who are like, I need 100% introversion all the time. And then there's people who are like 51% introverted. And so even in that, there's various degrees in every area. We'll cover what those areas are in a moment. But individuals attempting to meet their needs in ungodly ways, you're going to feel empty. Temperament needs being out of balance. When your life is going out of whack, it's usually a warning sign that your temperament needs are not being met. And you got to try to address it immediately, because it does have effect on you spiritually, emotionally, physically, temperamentally. We'll talk about that if we have time. Many times we don't know what our needs are and our potential destructive tendencies. And because of that, we don't actually help ourselves. This is why a lot of people do not have peace, because they don't understand their temperament and they don't understand what their needs are. They just know there's a void and an emptiness that's not being met. Have you ever felt that way? You probably have at some point in your life. You may be feeling it right now, that there's a void in your life and that you're feeling at odds with yourself. You're probably hard on yourself and you may not even know why. Part of that is understanding what your temperament is. And as I mentioned also, this is why we also treat people not the same. We as Christians, we want to give people the benefit of the doubt. This is one of the things I want to encourage all people. I look at culture and how everyone's like offended and canceling each other. I'm just like, why not give people the benefit of the doubt? Just because they're different doesn't mean you're right or wrong or they're right or wrong. Maybe it's just different perspective. If I said, what does this look like? What does this look like? What does everyone say? What's it look like? I know it's a cell phone, but what does it look like? Give me a descriptive. Black rectangle. Okay. But not to me. To me, it's a picture of my family. Same thing. Different perspective. Who's right or wrong? We're both right. So that's kind of the thing about temperament. Now with temperament, it's not just seeing my view or your view. And this is one of the things with the analogy when people say, oh, I see one perspective, so we're both right. That's not necessarily completely true. The goal is to walk around my phone and see the whole 360. Because I could get a limited view of this. That doesn't tell the whole picture. Not even looking at my side is the whole picture. Not even looking at both sides is the whole picture. I got to walk around the whole thing. So temperament helps us to be gentle with each other. Be like, okay, this person is extroverted. This person has this kind of struggle. This is how they're worrying. If I know that they have a temperament that's more susceptible to this kind of sinful struggle, but not with others, I'm going to be gentle with them and be more understanding. Or if this kind of person, they struggle with this issue or that, I'm going to be more understanding. Or if I understand this is how they're wired to think, I'm going to approach people differently. That's why we don't treat everyone exactly the same. So here are the 3 areas of temperament. The first is inclusion. This is your intellect and this is your social interaction. In this area, here's the thing that I tell every person. Every human person is intelligent. Here's the thing, but not all intelligences are the same. Okay? Some of you will have very good handyman intelligence. You can build anything. We got some of those. We got like the John Botkers and the Corey Wentzes. They can build literally anything. Okay? I don't have that intelligence. Okay? Now, I thrived in an academic standpoint. I'm good at reading books, learning facts, and putting it down on paper. Okay? And this is one of the reasons why I kind of struggle with the educational system. Even though I have lots of degrees and everything, we kind of only cater to one kind of intelligence. There's lots of intelligences. Everyone's intelligent. Every one of your kids is intelligent. We got to just discover what kind of intelligence it is. Does that kind of make sense? Because we kind of cater to the academic, intellectual ones. And even though we got Kevins and things like that thrive in that, that's not the only kind of intelligence. But what this area of temperament does is it makes known what kind of intelligence you have and your social interaction. For example, in this area, it explains your outgoingness. Being people-oriented and charismatic is a form of people intelligence. Okay? My son, Ace, he has a natural charisma that I don't have. Why? Because God made him more intelligent in that area. Okay? And so we have to understand this kind of inclusion makes known your kind of intellect, your kind of social interaction with other people. It helps make known whether you're introvert and extrovert. And here's the thing about introvert and extrovert. Introvert doesn't mean you only like being alone, or extrovert, you like being around people. It's how do you regenerate your energy? I regenerate my energy. I love people. I really, really do. I'm kind of socially awkward. I acknowledge that. I can be a little bit, stoic looking, even though I'm not inside. That's how I make myself out to appear at times. But the way I need to recharge is by being alone. Disney's an extrovert. She needs to recharge by being around people. So it has to do with how you recharge, not whether or not you like people or not. And it's not better to be an extrovert than an introvert, or an introvert than an extrovert. It's not better to be book smart than people smart, or people smart than book smart. They're all good. Do you see how the difference is? If we value people that way, then no one's better than anyone. Okay, second area, control. This is your willpower and your decision-making process. Now, some people, this is your strength of will. There are some people who are very strong-willed. Any of you have had strong-willed children? Okay, I'm a strong-willed person by nature. Okay, my poor parents. I was a good strong-willed child though. Okay, but here's the thing: there's a strength of will. Now, are there some people where you say, like I'm a rule follower. I do follow the rules because I see the logic in it. But are there some people where you can tell them to do something, they'll do it? Their strength of will is very low. Or their will is very strong. Control also makes known how we make decisions. Some people lead with their emotions and then follow with their logic. Other people lead with their logic and follow with their emotions. This is why people often butt heads a lot, because of how we're wired and how we come to these conclusions. Kind of the neuroscience behind temperament therapy is kind of interesting. But this is why the wiring is different. And then gender differences here even makes a difference. It's why how women approach things, they're more conversational and relational, whereas men, they're more A to B to C in their thinking. And so we understand control is your strength of will and how you're wired to make decisions. There's some people you've probably met, they can process information quickly and make a decision like that. There's other people where they got to overanalyze everything and take 5,000 years to make a decision. You can tell which one I am. I'm like, let's get it done. Okay. But, and then there's affection. This is how you give and receive love. How you display this. Now, how many of you have ever read Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages? Okay. Do you know what's interesting? your love language is usually based off of what temperament you are. It's actually, what the 5 love languages does is it actually captures the affection part of your temperament. It's how you give and receive love. That's why when you understand how, let's say Gary over there, I understand, let's say his love language is quality time. Let's say mine is acts of service. Well, I could try to show him all the love possible by doing nice things for him, but it means nothing to him. He's like, okay, thanks. And then he's like, hey, Micah, let's go hang out and do things. And I'm like, no. How about you just do something? And you see, so oftentimes we try to show people love in the way that's comfortable to us. And sometimes people will say, you don't really love me. And you're like, what do you mean I don't love you? Look at all the things I'm doing for you in this way. Well, it's not the way that they need to receive it. So when we understand each other's affection area of temperament, then we'd be like, okay, Mike likes receiving love this way. I'm going to receive him love this way. Or he knows, okay, that's Micah's way of how he likes to receive love. I'm going to show him love that way. Do you see how that complements a little bit better? It's kind of like if we speak 2 different languages, it's more effective if I learn your language and speak your language. If Walt only spoke Spanish, I could talk to him all day in English, but if I learned Spanish, then I could actually communicate. But here's the thing about this. Every one of these 3 areas has a set of temperament needs. You have a temperament set of needs in your inclusion, you have temperament needs in your control, and you have temperament needs in your affection. And when you do not have your temperament needs in one of those areas, you will have something out of whack emotionally, which often will lead to other issues in your life. That's why when you're struggling and you don't know why you're struggling, you just know there's a void there, that should be your warning sign. There's a temperament need that's going unmet right now. Now, the problem is we don't want to force our will on other people and force other people to meet our needs. That's actually one of the major problems we have in our world today. We try to get other people to meet our needs because we're empty. That's an unbiblical, unhealthy way to get your temperament needs met. And so we do not want to do that. But here, I'm going to give you another. Now, what I described to you was one form of temperament therapy. That's the one that I was trained in. Some of you have actually probably taken that test. I think you guys used to have an associate minister here that he actually did a test that is very similar. What's his name? He's down in Texas. Huh? Yeah, David Yasko. Some of what he does is actually temperament therapy, and I think he's done some of your guys' tests. What he tested was temperament therapy, and that's the form of temperament therapy that's taught with the National Christian Counselors Association, which I'm a part of. And I won't go into, if you want to know about the 5, they go through 5 different parts of different kinds of temperament. In each area, I'll just say it real quick. And if you want more detail, we can talk about it one-on-one sometime. But there's 5 temperaments: the melancholy, the choleric, the sanguine, and the phlegmatic, and the supine. And the thing that's different is in all 3 areas, you can have a specific temperament. So in inclusion, you could be a melancholy. In control, you can be a choleric. And in affection, you could be a supine. So this is why all of us, we're kind of a combination of a whole variety of different things. That's why we can't treat people differently. That's why when it comes to my logic inclusion part, I may respond this way. But when it comes to affection, I may be a different temperament that would respond this way. That's why everyone we look at each other and we're all like, you guys are messed up. It's not that we're messed up, it's that we're all different. It's mathematics, actually. Think of all the variable differences and then combine all that. And that's an oversimplified model. There's actually more complexity to it. You could actually have kind of a double looking temperament and then compulsions within that. So the mathematical exponents of temperament actually go much, much deeper, but I don't want to go into depth. But here's something I want you to do. If you have a phone, okay, I want you to type in this. I'm going to give you a different temperament test website. And the reason why I often have people do this temperament test is because it's free. The one that David Yasko or me or someone else would probably do. It's kind of pricey, so I don't like to have people take that one just because it's really, really pricey. But if you want another form, some of you guys have probably taken a temperament test called the Myers-Briggs. Has anyone ever heard of the Myers-Briggs? The Myers-Briggs is a temperament test. It actually covers 4 other different parts of temperament than the ones I mentioned. Actually, the 3 that I mentioned are kind of split up into 4 with the Myers-Briggs. But type in this 16personalities.com. 16 as in the number, 16personalities.com. I want you to take this test tonight, okay? It takes about 10 minutes. And I want you, if you're willing, and I know a lot of you have already taken this test and sent me your results, but I want to encourage you, if you actually get the results, send them to me, and all you're going to get is 4 little letters, okay? And then what that also does is helps me understand you, so I can, when we understand each other's temperaments, then we're like, okay, I understand why you think that way. I understand some of your emotional needs. I understand your strengths and weaknesses and things like that. So do that. When you're taking this test, there's a few things I need you to do. 1, be honest. A lot of people get wrong results because they answer how they would like to be perceived rather than what they really are. No one sees your answers. So 1, be honest. 2, be as specific as you can with your answer. Like it has like a range, a number range. Try to pick the most accurate because, like I said, temperament has various degrees. It's not you're just this. You may be this, but at like 50% versus a 90%. Third thing you need to do, if you don't know how to answer with your first inclination. It's kind of like taking a test. Go with your first thought. Don't second guess yourself. And fourth, take it when you're feeling emotionally stable. Don't take it when you're really angry or stressed, because that's going to affect how you answer in the moment, okay? And then so go on there. It takes about 10 minutes. I want to encourage you to do it tonight. Everyone who's live streaming, 16personalities.com, take the test, 10 minutes, follow everything I mentioned, and text me your result. It should be 4 letters, or Facebook message me, send me your 4, and if you want explanation or of what that is, it's kind of interesting. And that website is kind of neat. It kind of tells you famous people who have your temperament, and it kind of lists some of your strengths and weaknesses. It speaks very general. And as I mentioned before, once you get your results, I want you to also read it and say, does this sound like me? If it doesn't sound like you, you may have answered questions wrong. Or if you read it and you're like, whoa, this really sounds like me, but there's a few areas that don't sound like me. Remember, those are natural inclinations. Not everything is going to fit exactly the same because your character and your faith is going to modify some of that. That's why when you look, like some people may, let's say you have a temperament that has a natural inclination towards anger. You may not be an angry person because your faith in Christ grew you beyond that. So that might be a natural inclination that you have to be weary of, but it may not mean you're actually that or struggling with that in the moment. Does that make sense? Okay, it's kind of like if you're an alcoholic, you may not, you know the natural struggle of alcohol, but you may not have had a drink in 30 years. Okay, that because of character. So that's the thing. So that's kind of temperament. So the goal is to understand yourself by understanding your temperament. The second thing is to understand what your temperament needs, and trying to first and foremost have God heal you in that. Try to figure out your needs and say, God, help meet my needs in this area. Don't let me use other people to meet my needs, which is what most people do, and that just leads to more conflict and problems in your life. Okay, does that make sense? This is why we have a lot of marriage problems. Sometimes we are empty temperamentally, and then without communicating or understanding, or even understanding temperament therapy, we expect our spouse to meet our needs, even when we don't even know what our own needs are. But when you are more aware of your own temperament and your needs, then you can say, okay, here are my natural weaknesses I gotta, keep an eye on. The Bible talks about being sober-minded and self-disciplined and self-controlled. Understanding your temperament helps in that way. And then also understand your strength. Be like, whoa, maybe God really did make me much more talented than I imagined. How can I use that for God's glory and purpose and will? God didn't just put you on this earth for no reason. He put you on this earth to glorify him. And then I have a couple of minutes that I just want to share real quick. And I've used this analogy. You've heard me preach this lots and lots of times, but this is one of the things that I just try to emphasize over and over again, is the need for personal balance. In Mark 12:28-30 is the greatest commands, where he says, "And one of the scribes came up and heard them disputing with one another, and seeing that he answered them well, asked him, 'Which commandment is the most important of all?' And Jesus answered, 'The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength.'" So here's the thing. If you want to be a fully healthy person, you got to be healthy in all four areas. What's interesting is that Jesus has made known the four areas of a person. Your heart, we often emphasize this is your emotions and your character area. Your soul, that's your spiritual side. Your mind, this is your temperament that we're talking about. This is your thinking, your temperament, and your strength, your physical. And I often say these are like the four tires on your car. If one of your tires is low, how well does your car function? Like, let's say you eat a whole bunch of potato chips and you're guzzling down soda. How well do you feel afterwards? Do you feel like, yes, I feel like going and worshiping the Lord? No, you feel like garbage and you're like, I feel lethargic. So even how you are physically affects you spiritually. And if you're spiritually struggling, you're probably going to have emotional problems. If you're having emotional problems, you're going to have physical problems. Like if you're anxious and stressed, guess what? That naturally causes physical problems. This is why if we want to have a 360 health, we got to be healthy. We got to be healthy spiritually. We got to be healthy physically. We got to be healthy temperamentally. And temperamentally is where a lot of people struggle because people don't know about temperament therapy. And initially, when people hear it, they think it's voodoo. It's not voodoo, it's science. We have the neuroscience. Doctor of UCLA actually proves it with neurological scans. And fourth, with your emotions, your mental health, your emotional health. And let me tell you, if you get healthier in your temperamental area, that's going to help your emotional and spiritual side. If you get healthier in your spiritual side, because that's where you grow in your character, that's going to help in your temperamental and your emotional and physical side. You get physically healthier, the first thing they say is if you're feeling depressed, go jog for 30 minutes. Why? Because it affects all the chemicals that encourage the endorphins and the serotonins and things like that. And so they're all connected. So we want to have a 360 health. If we're going to drive our car as efficiently and as fast and as powerful as possible, we want to inflate all four tires. But in the church, I'm going to tell you, one of the problems we've done is we've overinflated just the spiritual side. What happens if you overinflate one tire on a car? It pops, and then you're stuck. Sometimes we've just said, okay, we've kind of neglected the physical side of man. God gave us bodies. Sometimes we neglect the temperamental side. God gave us genetics. Sometimes we neglect the emotional and mental health side. God gave us emotions. And this is where we want to be balanced. We want to grow in all four areas. And when our life feels out of whack, we're usually out of whack in one of those four areas. And a lot of times when we're struggling, we don't know we got to figure out which of these four areas am I struggling. Am I struggling spiritually? What do I need to do to repair that? Am I struggling in temperament? Okay, now I know where I'm struggling temperamentally. What area of temperament am I struggling? What need in my temperament is going unmet? And how can I biblically have that met? How can I have God help meet that? How can I communicate that to my Christian brothers or sisters or my spouse in ways that are not selfish, but just honest, so that they can help carry my burden in this area till I can get filled up. Does that kind of make sense? So my goal is, if you want to have some peace, a lot of people in this world don't have any peace because they don't have peace with themselves, because they just look at themselves and be like, everyone else is so much similar. How come I'm so different? Well, you just might be temperamentally different, and God made you that way on purpose. And if you're really having a hard time struggling, a lot of people who are struggling with depression and anxiety, a lot of it's because they've had a long-term starvation of their temperamental needs for a long, long time. And so what do you need to do? It's going to take time to refill the needs in all those. But once it slowly builds and builds and builds up, then you get into a healthier place. And when you're in a healthier place, guess what? You're more effective in serving God. This is why we want to be healthy in every way possible. Emotionally, temperamentally, physically, spiritually. Because we want to give God our whole person and say, God, I'm loving you with my whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. God, I'm loving you with all my temperament. I'm loving you how you made me. I'm loving you with my character and my emotions. I'm loving you with my logic. I'm loving you with my body. Do you see how if you accept how God made you and allow him to meet your needs, and you can communicate that to other people around you, how you'll be a healthier person and have more peace in your life? Let me tell you, if you're willing to do this, and if you want more help in this area, this is one of the areas I'm trained in. I'm trained in temperament therapy, I'm trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, and I study all forms of other counseling things because I'm required to every year, and I just want to expand my breadth of knowledge. But if you're really struggling and you want to talk more one-on-one with me, I encourage you to do that. Take your test, evaluate it. If it does sound like you, learn about yourself. If you have a spouse, maybe you show each other's, temperament results and be like, oh, my husband isn't a jerk. He just thinks differently. Or my wife isn't crazy. She just thinks differently. And then when you guys meet each other's temperament needs, you both get healthier. And when your focus is meeting on your spouse's needs rather than you focusing on your own needs and forcing your spouse to meet your needs, then you'll actually have a better relationship too. And if you take this logic with your brothers and sisters in Christ, with the people at work, with your kids, that's why Disney and I almost daily talk about our kids and their temperament and say, what can we do with our kids today to meet their temperament needs? And what is their natural struggles that we need to realize they're not just trying to be disrespectful or angry or whatever it may be that day. It may just be part of their natural temperament weakness that we have to help train using character and scripture to make that not as much of a weakness. Does that kind of make sense? And so if we are willing to do that and share with each other your guys' temperament. Now, be careful. Don't use temperament therapy to manipulate people. I'm going to tell you right now, yes, Facebook, YouTube, Google, all those, they actually know your temperament, and that's why they're so effective in conditioning you. It's because they know your temperament. This is why businesses invest a lot of money in temperament therapy. It's why the military uses temperament therapy. This is why, because they know you. So the important thing is knowing yourself and being healthier. And so I want to have positive peer pressure. Who's going to take this test tonight? Search16personalities.com. I want to see everyone raise their hands. Okay. If everyone's not raising their hand, glare at them. Thank you, son. I love you. And if you're willing, send me the 4 little letters. You're going to get 4 little letters. Text them to me, email them to me, Facebook message me. If you want to talk more about what those 4 little letters mean and how you can get healthier in that way, we'll talk about it. And so I hope you leave this class and realize it's okay to be Buddy the elf. You don't have to be a Christmas elf. You don't have to be like everyone else. You are made unique and special just the way God made you. So discover your temperament, discover your needs, and allow God to help meet them, and then shape that with God's scripture and character so that you can bring him the glory. Thank you.
That was interesting, Micah. I know my temperament. It's called a senior temperament. I like to relax a lot and take naps. So I think that's part of it.
I need a senior temperament.
Yeah. Well, you got to have the time first. You got to be able to relax and find time to take naps. Let's see. I was just told Kathy Simpson has recovered from her, was it foot surgery, and she's doing well, so which is good news. The only other thing I have is yesterday evening the elders met, and we are going to change the policy starting Sunday about masks. We said that we're trying to coordinate it with the state and the county. So we're saying, okay, masks will be recommended but not required starting Sunday. So if you don't feel you need to wear a mask, it's not required. We have a letter that you should receive in your email this evening. Penny was planning on sending it out. So I was told that the county now is blue. Last night it was yellow, so who knows? By next week it may be totally open. I don't know. We're trying to keep up, but things keep changing. So when you see the letter, it says that we're in the yellow state, and if it's blue, hey, we'll adjust to it. That's better. So it just makes things better. Anybody have any other announcements? I had down Alex Cox for closing prayer. He's not here though, is he? Okay, I guess I have it then. Father in heaven, we come to you at this time. We're grateful for everything you give us. We're thankful for the lesson Mike has presented. We appreciate him and his family, and we just are grateful for everyone, even those that are not able to meet with us. We look forward to being with them again, and we're grateful for those that are online, and we appreciate everyone who's here, and we ask, Father, that you continue to bless our church and help us always to grow spiritually, and we pray everything in Jesus' name. Amen.